Well, hello and happy Friday, everyone. Shannon, how's it
Hel-
going today?
Hello. Very excited. Very excited for
Yes.
today.
Yeah, this is going to be a great one. Obviously, I'm not Javier. You're
Obviously,
not
I'm not Paul.
Javier. So it's even more special because of the guests that we have. But I want to go ahead and kick it over to you for a second and let you kind of intro a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So here we are rounding out Women's History Month. We're almost through the month. Um, this team, our Speed Bumps team, and talking to our guests today, have had some fun conversations around the word history and whether it really does service or detracts from the fact that there's still perpetual challenges and things that women have present in their lives and in the workplace. Societal expectations, boardrooms that lack representation of not only women but other cultures, and this like constant aspiration for life balance outside of work. Women have always struggled with these challenges. So in this episode, we're going to talk to two accomplished women as they share their experiences and challenges. And I think they're going to talk a little bit about how they've paved the way for others and trying to lift up the next generation of working women. So it's going to be a really exciting episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, for everybody who's joining us for the first time, welcome to Speed Bumps Live. We're a weekly, well, actually bi-weekly web show that discusses marketing challenges and opportunities with leaders from different industries. But as Shannon said, we've got a special episode here. Both are marketing and communication leaders. Um, I'm Paul Carpenter.
And I'm Shannon Delaney. And before we get started, I just wanted to quickly mention that the chat feature is off, but we will be doing QA throughout the show, or at the end of the show rather. But the Q&A will be open. So as things pop up and you think of a question that you want to ask one of our guests, go ahead and pop it into the Q&A, and we will definitely make time for that towards the end of the show. All right. So Paul, why don't you tell us a little bit about our first guest?
Absolutely, absolutely. So first up, I'm going to introduce Allison Hill. She's head of diversity and social responsibility at Roark Capital. Allison's a leader with an entrepreneurial spirit with 20 plus years of experience in domestic and global roles, where she has built products and brands across multiple industries. She's used her marketing strategy and communications expertise for brands such as Sprint, Coca-Cola, Miller's Ale House, and now at Roark. Her current role as head of diversity and social responsibility allows her, and it's actually really unique, to use that marketing background with her passion for helping others succeed. I personally know Allison. Her passion is through the roof for helping to see others succeed. And her background, she's even part of, outside of work, she's part of the steering committee and chairwoman for DEI committee for the President's Council of Cornell Women. So Allison, will you join us for a second here?
Hi, Paul. Thank you for
Awesome.
having me. Hi, Shannon.
Absolutely.
Hi,
Absolutely. Thanks for
welcome.
joining us. And Shannon, tell us about our other guest.
So our next guest is Kim Gnatt. She's the Chief Digital Officer at Elanco, her new role. She is a marketer that has also over 20 years of experience in digital branding, strategy, customer engagement, and even more. And her experience ranges back to the Home Depot and Coca-Cola, where she's actually been my client twice. I've gotten a chance to work with her hands-on. She's also had her own marketing consultancy, and now at Elanco, she, as I said, is a Chief Digital Officer. She knows how people and brands can improve and influence others through marketing. And she has a huge passion for building up women and helping them succeed. I've seen it myself. She's done it for me. And she's working really hard to change the look of the boardroom. And she currently serves on the board of directors for Rebecca's Tent Women's Homeless Shelter. And she's also on the UGA Digital Executive Board. So very excited to have Kim. So Kim, jump on with us. Yay.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. All right. Well, as Paul said, we're just going to dig right in because we've got a lot of fun stuff to talk about today. So where I kind of wanted to start was this idea of what happened when we all finally got to the boardroom. Kim, you have a really great story. You've been a very career-driven woman. You've seen and done a lot of things. I love this story that you told us about your aspirations to the boardroom, even going so far as to apply for The Apprentice. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, I think it's a good one, especially in light of, I think, everything in the current climate in the US. So it's a pleasure to see everybody and be a part of this group. Thank you, Shannon and Paul, for having Allison and I. To Shannon's point, Women's History Month, I think, is so important, and it's more about, I think, our future and almost using that as a pivot point from where we've been in the past. So in my past, I had this vision of the boardroom, which very much looked like a traditional boardroom, big, long table, people around it making really important decisions. And so when The Apprentice first was kind of announcing auditions, I said, oh man, that would be perfect. It kind of brings my personal desire to achieve and motivate in with something kind of really exciting and different. And so I went into that thinking that was a really good place for me. What I ended up learning through Mark Burnett's production company putting on The Apprentice, that their version of the boardroom was very different than my version of the boardroom. I thought women would show up in this boardroom and have a voice and an equal seat at the table. And we would have real business conversations, solving real world business problems. And interestingly enough, it was almost the opposite. They viewed me potentially as a candidate to be on The Apprentice, to be more of a corporate vixen, maybe a woman who went through, kind of challenging times related more to, I think, my gender than my actual brain. And so I found myself in this very precarious situation, having to make a decision. Is this a show that I want to be on because it represents who I am as a career woman? Or is it who they want me to be, which is much more of a character in their version of a film for what their version of the boardroom looks like? And so I ended up walking away from the experience, realizing that has nothing to do with what I'm seeking, and instead wanted to be in a boardroom where there was kind of this idea of equality and purpose for women as real business leaders in our country. So it was acutely interesting for me of the recent elections, and that was probably a good choice for me at the time. And so I hold that as a bit of a humorous moment for me in my career.
That's fantastic. Allison, how about you? What were your thoughts as you were kind of coming up through your career and that aspiration to be part of the boardroom, and what you found?
So, and first of all, Kim, I think you could have taken Bill Rancic down. So, for sure.
Love it.
I love that you were brave enough to make a decision to say no, because I think that's really hard for women when you think that you only have certain opportunities. So I grew up super ambitious, wanted to do my thing in corporate life, really had a strong desire for brand and marketing and loved the whole aspect of that. But for me personally, I didn't really understand this until I was older, and maybe even in this job, was about the societal expectations and how that influences how we feel about ourselves. Very similar to what Kim was saying, because things are portrayed in the media a certain way. It's only mean women that make it to the top, or extra tough women, things like that. So for me, it was always trying to balance, from a societal standpoint, having a really strong role model as a mom who didn't work outside the home, and a very strong role model in my dad, who was a big entrepreneur. And I saw their partnership and how they worked together. And so I was constantly trying to figure out how to blend the two of those. And I was telling Paul a story about just some of those things of being a woman from the 80s, early 90s, of the big shoulder pads and the whole thing. But I remember my very first job, and there was a dress code, and it was a skirt. Like, you could not wear pants. It was a skirt and a jacket, and you had to wear these very expensive pantyhose that they made you buy. So we even had to wear hose. Like, to even say pantyhose today makes me laugh. And but they really wanted you to have like that polished female look. And I would walk by, like, I worked in a hotel, and it was the GM that was there, and I'd walk by his desk, and he'd be like, Allison! I'm like, what? He's like, lipstick, lipstick, lipstick. And I would walk back to my desk thinking, I don't own lipstick. Like, I might have a gloss, possibly maybe chapstick. And I just would roll my eyes and I was thinking, why is all this pressure on us? And like the guys get to wear the same thing every single day and change out their tie. So, so for me, it was having the ambition, but then trying to weave my way through some of those society things. And I have lots of stories of those for sure.
Well, let's definitely stick a pin in those, because I know we could probably talk about them for hours. But I think there's something definitely with the societal side of things and how it impacts today's workplace. Allison, we'll go back to you. We're going to try to do, we'll try to teeter-totter back and go, let Allison lead and then let Kim lead, but let's keep this very organic as we normally do. I want you to share your thoughts a little bit more about even like some influences. Kim talked about, the impact of media and, having that societal norm and what media says. Who are some women that maybe even you look towards as far as that kind of impact early in your career?
So at a younger age, it for sure was who was on TV, and successful women on TV were Oprah, right? Or Katie Couric or Diane Sawyer. So, you didn't have a ton of female role models to look up to. But I would say probably the most influential person in my career, if we go down that path, would be the woman who gave me my first break in a marketing job. And that was Kim Gnatt. She works at Coca-Cola still, but that was at Sprint. And
love Kim Gnatt.
Yes, right? Like she's hilarious too. So super smart, really supportive, but took a risk on me to get me my first job. And what was awesome is that's when I started to learn the power of the network too, because I had moved a couple jobs and then she heard through the grapevine that I was moving to Atlanta for my husband's job. And she called me and was like, hey, we have a position at Coke. Would you be interested in this? And so when I think about women supporting women, or, how that whole network works, she was probably early in my career, the most influential person for me to believe in me.
Yeah, that's great. And Kim, do you have some thoughts around this and some early motivations and people who kind of influenced you and pushed you?
Yeah, definitely. I love that Allison brought up kind of the role that her parents played. I feel the same way. My mom was a self-made entrepreneur, ran her own business. And so I for women, it's so important, I think, to have role models that you can almost create like this visual picture of, almost like sitting on your shoulder and kind of giving you advice no matter what age or moment you're in. I think it's so important for us. Women are such connected, verbal people that kind of require synthesis of ideas to kind of help us formulate what we're going to do. And so this idea of having role models that we can rely on, I think is really important for us. And I've seen that. To even go very similar where Allison was, Wendy Martin, who was, I think one of my first bosses at Home Depot, she too gave me an opportunity. And she saw my potential before I knew my own potential. And then gave me the room as a leader to kind of grow and figure it out on my own. And that's something I've taken with me through all of my roles in terms of my relationship with my leader, but then also my relationship with my team. And so there's this space between almost kind of giving somebody the ability, the confidence that you have in them with their potential, but then giving them this play and the style to form their version of their truth. That's so important. And I think women really appreciate that, especially because we're constantly trying to balance a lot of things. And so having room to breathe and go at a pace that works for us, but having somebody, again, sitting on our shoulder with the confidence that we can do it is really important. There's the other point I wanted to make is there's kind of this chain that I've developed in my career of women that have helped me and I've helped them. And somehow we all kind of chain together in this really interesting way. There's women at Coke who I continue to keep in touch with that were either my leaders or almost my sounding board at Coke that have become my clients and now almost are my mini board of directors that help shape and guide a lot of the decisions that I make in my career. And that organically formed over time. So to Allison's point, that idea of the network, as small, as big as you make it, I think it's really important because they can act as the guiding kind of forces behind some of your choices when you need help. And we need a lot of help day in and day out.
That's really a great way to put it. You know, it's funny because my experience was really different. I started out, you know, more than 20 years ago in technology and was often one of the only women managed by men, managing men around lots of men. And it was really confusing for me back then because I was being managed by a man to almost try to act that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so counter to who I was that I remember going through this sort of almost like crisis of confidence early on, trying to figure out like, how do I do something that's not inherent to how I behave? And I did kind of the same thing you're talking about. I kind of created this chain of women, you know, the few that were around me, and just kind of, you know, coming together and figuring out like, how should we really behave at work? We, you know, when we see other women just acting like men in the workplace, it's very odd and very confusing, and it's not using the best of the strengths, you know, that we have that make us unique. So I think I've done exactly that too, is kind of built up that network. But you said something, Kim, I thought that's a really nice segue into our next topic. You talked about recalibration as like a really common theme when we were talking earlier. You know, otherwise the you know, pursuit for this whole work-life balance thing that, you know, whether it's real or a fallacy or not, I kind of like this idea of recalibration as an easier way to think about it. Allison, why don't you told this really great story about oddly, well, I won't give it away. You tell the story about where you got this idea of the pie and the recalibration. It was great.
Okay, great. So it was one of those times where, you know, the old-fashioned way of looking at this work-life balance is like these two different things, and then people talk about it as integration, and then that didn't really seem to resonate with me either. But I was really struggling, and I felt like I was out of rhythm of where my ambitions were and where my current situation was. And so, of course, I was feeling very victim-y and feeling sorry for myself. And I was like, Jeff, it's your fault that we moved to Atlanta, you know, the whole thing. So we decided to give, you know, he's my best friend. We met freshman year of college. And so we're like, okay, let's go try this marriage counseling thing. And so to everybody that's listening, I think this is a tool that you can use with a partner. You can use it by yourself. But it really gave me an aha moment of what mattered to me. Meaning, like, it wasn't about a career ambition. It was about who I was as a person and where my priorities were. So the exercise was to make a pie and to complete it separately. And you make pieces of your pie of what's most important to you, or what a hobby is that you want to include. And you know, if your family is most important, that should be the biggest piece of your pie. So we finish our 2 pies. And of course, Jeff's is really simple and easy to read. Mine had like 1 million slices in it. But what I realized was I wasn't really not succeeding in my career. I was perfectly fine where I was, because when I looked at my life as this whole pie, it was the success that I was looking for. And so that exercise taught me a lot about the why we make certain decisions, made me understand his whys really well. And now it's an exercise that I use to kind of calibrate where and reassess, you know, what is important to me right now, because we all change and life is not about this one moment in time. You know, we're going through seasons and chapters of our life, and we need to adjust for that accordingly. And according, you know, whether you have kids or elderly parents or whatever our priorities are at the time, I just think this exercise is a really good one. And then I will say that Jeff and I left that, we made out at the elevator bank, and I was like, oh, I love you. And then we never went back. So it was a really good exercise.
Clearly, very good exercise. How about you, Kim? What is your advice, you know, for women that are trying to have it all? Like, is that even, you know, realistic? Thoughts on that?
It's honestly a question I struggle with every day. legitimately. I'm always trying to balance personal, social, professional, me outside of personal and family, right? So I love Allison's pie because it's a good visual to, I think, represent all the things we're trying to accomplish, but we all know there's only a certain amount of time in the day. And so we have to be choiceful. I think having a rigor around how you're making those choices is really important. And I think that's different for everybody. For me, I'm a very visual person on the HBD scale, or the red, green, blue, yellow. I'm very much a yellow person. And so it helps me to visualize the day ahead in terms of like what pieces of the pie I'm actually achieving. So I'll try and put this idea of my kids in my frame and say, what does that actually look like? Success for me today is I get to drive carpool, which maybe isn't that sexy, but it's real. Versus in my professional life, maybe it's doing really well at a particular meeting or presentation. And then my me time is maybe being able to get a run in or a Peloton ride. And so it's, for me, being clear on what those things are. And then just being kind to myself. There's obviously going to be a ton of things that I could get done that I won't. Trying to not really look backwards and beat myself up on things that didn't get done, and be a bit free spirited and say, of the things I couldn't do today, there will be tomorrow. So that's part of it. That's my kind of version in the day to day. At the higher level, I try and kind of go by this notion of trust the journey. If your intentions are right and you you're guided by your intuition, then sometimes you just got to let go of all of the noise and just trust that you're going to be making decisions day to day to take you forward. And that's a little bit more spiritual, but something that, I don't know, gives me enough space to be comfortable with saying no to things. And knowing that if it's the right time and the right place, I'll say yes. But if it's not, I have to be comfortable saying no. And it makes us so uncomfortable. I had to do it this morning where somebody asked me, Kim, you would be really helpful to help us on this assignment. And genuinely, I really want to help, but I know if I go do that, I'm going to have to give up something else. And so there's like those trade-offs that I think are really important, and just getting comfortable with saying no. And almost making it a practice, like see if you can challenge yourself each week in order to create that balance, saying no to just a few things. The interesting thing about it is when you do it, it feels really good afterwards, because you feel like you've taken ownership of your day and your choices in a way that, I think gives more strength to you as a person.
That's great.
It's fantastic.
One of you actually asked me that question, when we were kind of talking about the show, and I hadn't really stopped and thought about it until I was asked. And, the way I, answered the question was at the literal moment that I was made my way into the boardroom. I had been working on a go-to-market strategy for my last company for about a good 3 months. I mean, it was probably one of the most complex projects I've ever done in my life. And I was literally in the boardroom at our private equity firm delivering this go-to-market strategy. I was having a health crisis. I had just gotten diagnosed with Lyme disease and another tick-borne illness that's a malaria type infection. I was melting down literally. And I was arrived. I was in the boardroom. That's what I had aspired to my whole career. And then all of a sudden I realized, like, I can't do all this. And so my pie got real different real fast. And I think as women, as much as we love each other and try to support each other, we also judge ourselves against each other. And I was looking around and watching people in my career like rise to these different levels that I felt like, but I want to do that too, but I want to do that too. And I had to make a decision to like take the gas, foot off the gas pedal at a time when that momentum was really starting to happen. So it's really kind of an interesting, dynamic. But it kind of leads to this other topic, which is something that you said, Allison, when we spoke, and it just like crystallized in my mind the moment you said it, is this idea of like trying to make sure that you are not ever hitting an expiration date, right? How do you, or you said it even better. You said ambitious without an expiration date. I love that. Talk to us about what you mean by that and kind of what's wrapped up inside of that sentiment.
Sure. So after I finished my pie, I realized that I was ambitious all the way around, not necessarily in my career. I was never a title person. I just love to learn. I love to build. Um, and so I just adopted this phrase for myself that was be ambitious with no expiration date, because you can achieve so much more and know that each experience, and I loved what Kim was saying about the journey. If I had just trusted the universe a little bit more and relaxed, I probably would have less gray hair that I'm trying to dye right now. And so for me, at that time, my kids were, let's say, 8 and 10 when I figured this out. And I was in this super cool job at Coke, learning amazing things, working on Sprite and the basketball. So working with the NBA, working on music, traveling around the world to work on global IMC. And it was super cool. And it wasn't the time for me to work more hard than I was to like rise up a chain, but I wanted to continue to learn. And so I ended up finding an executive program through Cornell, which of course I love from my undergrad, and went ahead and got my MBA at the same time as I was working at Coke. And so I realized I can be ambitious in different forms and formats, and also not to put so much pressure on myself, to know like when the time is right, you can move to the next phase in your next chapter where you can take on more, like just what you were saying, you know, health is number one. So absolutely you can step to the side, but it's really hard when we do look around and we start comparing ourselves. And I'll go back to the society thing for a bit too. I think our society in particular, our nation, puts a lot of emphasis on this early success. And like, why? You know, people can be successful at any age. I look at the founder of KFC, or I look at the founder of Roark, who's incredible. And you know, things happen in your own personal journey. So yeah, be ambitious with no expiration date.
I love it. Well, you know, I joke around with some of my friends like, oh my God, am I really going to be a 60-year-old marketer? I used to say 50, but I'm 50 now. So now I have to say 60. Am I really going to be a 60-year-old marketer? Like, what does that even look like? How am I going to stay fresh? You know, how do you stay ahead of the curve, but also balancing it with, I've got experience. I've seen things. I've done things. You know, Kim, talk a little bit about how you're balancing, how you stay current, you know, the pressures, if you feel any around that, and how that manifests and how you feel the need to kind of prove yourself every day.
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. Somebody that I follow and I find very inspirational is Diane Von Furstenberg, right? Fashion icon who I always kind of look to in terms of the style that she possessed and kind of brought forward in her company. In the past 15 years, and her presence in social media has kind of exposed me to a different version of her. She's 74 years old and probably a list of top 10 women who continue to inspire me on a day-to-day basis. And it's because of her, I'm going to chalk it up to a growth mindset. She's just so curious and adventurous and is constantly kind of like pushing herself to be more and to do more and try new things and look at things differently. And so I think it's all around like our perception and our curiosity. And so I love, you know, to build on what Allison was saying, right? She got this awesome job and then she went into this program. That shows her desire to just continue to grow and build and on herself and be curious to learn more and do. And so I think if you have that in you, there is no expiration. And DVF, I think, is a good example of that. She just keeps going and going. And you can get in the styles of the fashion lines that she's producing. They're the freshest versions of who I think can represent women today than of anyone that I've seen. And so it's so interesting that her growth mindset almost applies to like the tangible output she's putting into the market. And I think that's a really good recipe for success, right? It's like, who are you and what's your curiosity? Like what gets you up in the morning? Some people are motivated by leading people. Some people are motivated by the technical aspects of their work. Some people are motivated by the mathematics of what they're doing. And so I think it's really understanding like what motivates you the most and just keep growing there. Keep your curiosity going, listen to podcasts, attend, SpeedBumps live when it's people that, you get excited by. I think no matter what your age or your form, if you apply that curiosity, you will be successful in big organizations, medium organizations, small organizations, because people want to be around people like that, right? It creates these kind of positive energy environments. And I think now, especially with COVID and the pandemic, the idea of positive energy being something that people are drawn to, which on Zoom can be really hard, right? When we're in Zoom meetings all day long, it's like, I want to go to the meetings where I'm having the most fun and feeling the most energized with the people around me, because otherwise it gets real dry. And so I think that focus on curiosity and trying to find the ways to keep you curious and adventurous is, it also makes it just so much more fun. So that's probably my advice.
Love it.
That's great advice for everybody, male, female, it doesn't matter, but I want to get back into the movement of making sure, being the only male on this panel right now, I want to be very cognizant, and I want to almost push my male counterparts to listen in a little bit more and make sure that we are better stewards, better partners. And I know that that's something we talked about earlier. Kim, I actually want to jump a little bit off of that staying curious idea, and I kind of want to take that into the realm of saying no as well. You talked about that earlier, but I want to thread that through with this curiosity aspect. How do you balance that, given the societal preview, if you will, of how women, quote unquote, should be in the workplace? How do you say no, but while still staying curious? Like, is there any advice out there? And then is there advice, it's kind of a two-part question. Is there any advice there to give to males to be a little more like accepting and go, wait a second, no, that's right. That's exactly right.
Man, those are big questions.
I'm like, good luck, Kim.
I love it though. So, saying no while staying curious, I think it goes back to that compartmentalization of your week or your day. Like, I try to look at my calendar the Sunday before and figure out, do I have enough space in this week to get the inspiration I need? And I'll look at it, and sometimes it will be lunch with a friend who is somebody that I, have a ton of respect for, and I know I'll be inspired both personally and professionally from that. Or it may be, right, participating in something that's going to, I think, elevate my capability inside my, day-to-day work. So looking at the calendar and creating space for the curiosity, and then, allowing yourself and giving yourself the permission to say no at least 2 times a week, if not more. If you can do more, awesome. Because what that is allowing is, right, it's that idea of making those choices. But to kind of go back to, I think, where you were even going, Paul, I had a really poignant moment in my career that was with a male leader that probably shaped me and kind of who I am today. And so I was in a role leading digital and for a e-commerce startup, and I was about to go on maternity leave. And I was going on maternity leave for 8 weeks. And I had just built this digital team of all these incredible, smart people from my past. And we had kind of gelled as this unit. And we had people doing email and search and e-com and measurement, all the digital marketing tactics that everyone was so excited to be doing for this particular brand. And I was a little nervous to go out on maternity leave because at the time, it wasn't really clear kind of what that meant inside this company. And it certainly was nowhere near, I think, how we have maternal and parental leaves now. And while I was out on maternity leave, my boss at the time texted me one day and said, I'm going to fire this guy on your team. And I just wanted to let you know. And I didn't know what to do with that information, right? I didn't think it was right. First of all, to even be engaging me in that way while I'm out on leave with a newborn. But it almost forced me at that moment in time to think like, first of all, that's a leader I will never be. Right. And that was an important lesson for me. Two, how did that like legitimately make me feel both personally and professionally? It felt like it was almost against my moral values that A, that he was doing that, but then B, kind of putting me in this corner to now be a part of somebody else's life that was going to kind of receive this negative news. And I wasn't comfortable with, so I had to fight for it. And what ended up coming to me as somewhat of a decision point afterwards, and realized I just wasn't comfortable working for somebody that had that type of mindset. And embrace that conversation with him. It was extremely hard. In fact, I ended up kind of turning to looking inside and thinking maybe it was something in me that I was doing wrong that wasn't meeting the needs of him. I think sometimes as women, we do that, right? We look inside first and say, what is it that I'm just not accomplishing that's almost enabling my leader to try and jump in to make these decisions for me? What wasn't I doing right? And I had to work through that for a few months, which was painful, really painful emotionally for me. And as if I didn't have enough going on trying to lead this team and have this newborn for the first time. But to kind of pull this all together, I ended up having to make the decision to leave the company and realize that who you work for, both the type of company and the purpose of that company, and who you work for in terms of your direct manager is such an important decision, right? And we have to learn from really bad leaders what really good leaders look like. And so I don't have any regrets about it. I ended up resigning because I was ready to have my second child. And I knew there was no way that I was going to kind of continue to live in this environment. And that's actually when I went to Coke and ended up working for a woman, Julie Bowerman, to this day, who's on my mini board of directors, who continues to guide and shape me into the future. And Coke gave me the environment to blossom as a parent. And so I think making choices as a female leader, it's really important to think about the environment and company and the leader. And so saying no to him and kind of making that choice while it was difficult, I did it. And it is one of the smartest decisions I've made in my career.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story. And I'm glad you pulled that out. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. That's it, but I'm actually glad because we probably wouldn't be talking today.
Yeah, made me stronger. It's all good.
That's exactly right. Allison, I'm going to kick it over to you and I'm going to give you, because Kim was talking about leaders, and I think that's a perfect segue. And I have a note here from an earlier conversation you and I had. And I want you to say the quote, but I think it's your current leadership and your current role, and it had to do with vulnerability. Is that, yeah. Can you dig in on that a little bit? And I know we're probably going a little long because I know we need to get to Q&A, but I really want you to tell this story here about vulnerability.
Sure. So when I came in to talk to Neil about the job at Roark, which if no one has had the opportunity to know anything about him or understand him at all, he's like my personal Warren Buffett, right? The closest I've ever gotten to like that much success, but it's for a reason. And he's unbelievable at reading people. And his entire purpose is, how am I going to unlock the potential of my people that work at the firm, as a team? How am I going to unlock the potential of the businesses? And how are we going to then unlock the potential of the limited partners that invest in us? Because a lot of those people are pension funds and firemen, pension funds, or CHOA, or like, we're really at the base, and the purpose of Roark is enabling people to thrive across all of these things. And so I think that's just been his purpose. And so I was really excited about the job. I was building out the philanthropic strategy from scratch, and also figuring out DEI for the firm, and then as applicable for portfolio companies that needs assistance with that. And I was nervous. Like, this was a chance of a lifetime. It's a very small firm. It's the highest IQ people I've ever been around. You know, I was the 5th professional woman to come in. It was really intimidating because I'm trying to be, you know, an advocate for change and not understanding the environment and all of that. And I went in and I did like my first couple presentations, and I did it in a style that was very marketing-ish, right? The PowerPoint deck, the whole thing. And the next day he came into my office and he shut the door and he was like, Allison, he's like, I just want to tell you something that I think that if you adopt this, success will be imminent for you. He's like, don't be perfect. I want you to be vulnerable. I want you to go ask. I don't want you to have the answer. I don't want you to ever think you have the answer. I want you to iterate. I want you to collaborate. He's like, just think of this as like interacting with as many people as you can to get to the best answer. And it was, I mean, I think he's probably the most influential person in my career. I've seen, you know, how he's helped others be successful, but it was awesome because it was about, you know, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? Like, don't try to always be perfect and have the answer. Go and get the best answers for what you're working on. And I think it's hard because you want people to view you as smart or capable or whatever, but it was the best advice ever. And we've been able to make massive impact at the firm. And I think a lot of that was being vulnerable enough to know and to go into somebody that I'm like tiptoeing in their office, can I talk to you? And being a little bit nervous. And, but it's really created a lot of great results for us. And so I will forever be grateful to him because I think that's something that, you know, I learned a little bit too late in life. So I wish I'm going to try to pass that to my daughters.
But just like Kim said earlier, there is no expiration date, right?
True.
So anyway, I think looking at the time and given the time, I know Shannon and I have a couple of more questions, but we're going to, I think, forego those. And we're going to kick it over to Q&A and see what kind of questions we have flying in. Kaona, do you want to join us? And mute. There you
Hi,
go.
guys.
Awesome.
Hi.
Hey, great talk so far. You guys are speaking to my soul, and I think lots of other people, hopefully, who are watching. So great. All right. So the first question that I have, I'm going to ask for myself selfishly, just to slide that in there, is about imposter syndrome. What are your thoughts around it? Have you experienced it? Do you still experience it? And how can you kind of overcome that and just be in your role as a strong woman and you know what you're doing?
Okay, I'll go first, Kim, because I absolutely experience it. And in fact, 2 weeks ago, my husband's like, what's wrong? Something seems off. And I'm like, I'm having imposter syndrome today because I was working on something. So I think the reality is that it doesn't matter your gender. Everybody has imposter syndrome. I think research has shown that women admit it more, but I think it's, you know, knowing that everybody goes through that a little bit. And it goes back to what Kim was saying. And I think something that's been really important for me too is like, who's your network? Who's your support system? Whether that is an old boss, if it's your best friend, if it's your partner, but somebody that can talk you off the ledge a little bit and then, you know, get that renewed confidence that you are where you are for a reason, and to be confident in that. But it's definitely something that I think we all experience, no matter how much experience we have.
Yeah, I think we all face it. I think especially in light of there's a bit of I'm going to say repression of women in the workplace for a number of years. I think just even with the systemic racism in the country, there's these somewhat social norms that I think we're all fighting against. So sometimes I look at it and I question my own ability to do something. And I'm like, well, I have confidence in myself. Why is it that I'm somewhat comparing myself to other people in the boardroom or think that I can't do it. And I think it's because society has kind of created this feeling for me that, I don't know, I may not be as equal. And so there's some real perseverance there in both head and heart that I think we all have to put forward to try and overcome, because I think it's fake news, right? It's not real. And so I think the true belief in yourself has to be the guiding force. The other thing that I would say is the ask of all the men on this call and the women in this call is when you're kind of sitting around the table with your colleagues, be really mindful of the mental state that maybe they're coming from, and think about that, right? Think about that when you're having a hard conversation. There's an amazing book called Crucial Conversations that is really a tool that when you're needing to have a hard conversation, it's a way to kind of approach it. I would say when you're having some of those difficult conversations, really think hard about the people around the table or just the person across the table that you're having that with, and really try and create the context from where they're coming from. So often I think I'm sitting around, in a conversation with people that don't understand my starting point. And so they immediately jump in trying to accomplish something, but not really think about who I am on a personal level and trying to make that connection with me to then kind of build from there. And so I would say to all of us as leaders, we have to be much kinder and more open to understanding what people's personal positions are and where they're coming from before jumping in to somewhat make a business decision. And I think that will create a more inclusive culture, a more supportive culture. And I think it'll address this imposter syndrome, because it'll help us understand, right, we're all in this together, and together I think is better than alone. And so that is, that's how I think we need to overcome it. But it is something that I face often, just like Allison.
Well, I'll jump. Go ahead. No, you go, Allison.
I was just going to say one thing to build on with what Kim was saying is I think imposter syndrome isn't just about career, because there was a time that I was in an interview with the CEO for a certain role, and they knew who my husband was. And they said, but how would you be able to do this job with your kids? And I'm like, what? Okay, so the dialogue continues, but I walked away feeling like, I guess I'm not a good mom. Like the fact that like I had to get the hamsters out of my brain about that kind of imposter syndrome too. So I think it flows into all aspects of life, and it's a very natural human thing.
It's so funny you say that, because I had a similar, when my husband just started his new job, his boss asked him, hey, is your wife going to stay working full time? Because I think if you're going to take this job, she's going to have to make a change.
Oh, wow.
And honestly, when that got translated to me, it gave me more fighting power, because I'm like, first of all, that's not the right.
After you were done wanting to drive down the street, right?
I am the wrong person to have that conversation with, A, and B, now I have to go prove to the world that that's a falsity. Back to, I think, us trying to also be super ambitious. But so I think it's taking those moments and using them as a way to pivot and actually show the world that, some of those falsehoods are wrong. But it's funny, Allison, that you and I both had that.
I think it's more.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Wendy Clark is somebody I really look up to. I know you both know her well from Coca-Cola, and I'll never forget this, because before imposter syndrome even had a label, I was at a women's conference, and somebody asked her, have you ever felt like you weren't qualified, to take on a certain role? And she said, I've never felt qualified to take on a certain role. She goes, if I see a job description, she said, first of all, if the job has 10 qualifications, a man's going to look at it and go, I got 5 of the 10. Sweet. Where do I apply? Whereas a woman's going to look at it and go, ooh, I only have 8 of the 10. I'm not qualified. I guess that's not for me. And so it just stuck in my brain. And it's always translated to advice to people around, take a minute to just, like, if you're having a moment of crisis of confidence, like, write down all the things you are good at. Like, if you need to do that self-inventory to give yourself the grace to be like, damn, I'm actually pretty good at some of this stuff. Sometimes we just have to do that for ourselves. And I think it sounds really, elementary to do something like that, but I think it's something we do kind of need to stop and take stock of on occasion. So that's kind of how I tell people to cope with it sometimes. Like, you
Shannon,
are
that's
awesome.
so good.
Write down a list of all the ways you're awesome.
That's right.
Love that. Everyone needs an awesome list. You need your pump up list to go through and read and be like, I got this. Oh yeah. So the next one that we have from an anonymous user, which ties into what you were saying, Kim, with having it's a culture aspect as well. Are you finding that most companies are doing a better job with DE&I, especially in today's climate? Do you think there's still a lot of work to do? If so, why, and what are some of those observations? It's kind of loaded, so.
I can jump in. So much room for opportunity. So much so, I just joined a company, Elanco, who was previously Eli Lilly. And the company is making, I think, huge strides in this space, but we could be moving a lot faster. And my best kind of example is, and I actually shared this on LinkedIn a couple of months back, when the current, I think, administration put a greater representation of genders and races and cultures into our kind of political representation in the country. To me, the statement around our boardrooms need to look much more like the representation of the United States. It is still not like that. And I'm a huge advocate for that. There's actually a group that we're forming to really be, I think, focused on this in the marketing industry, where, marketing has really been ahead of the curve in making sure that we have much more diverse orientations of, agencies and companies and marketing teams, but nowhere near what I think is the right representation of America. And so I think until we have achieved somewhat of that equality, we haven't achieved success yet. But some of that, right, that's just the numbers. It's also, I think, in the mindset, and it's on us, all of us here and our personal networks, to make this a top priority. The change that we want to see, we have to model that change. And so who I bring into my team, who I associate myself with, to me has to be a representation of that model of the future. And I think that's something that we should all ascribe to and make part of our kind of core day-to-day of how we bring, manage talent, bring talent in, and just try and expose people to these real conversations.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Kim said. There's so much opportunity, and it takes work. And so I think the more, it's just something that is going to have effort. It's going to have resources, whether it's human or capital, and it needs to be integrated into all aspects of the business for it to succeed. And the number one thing is that leadership belief at the top, because the reporting is out there and the research is out there. If you have, a more diverse executive team, your profitability is up 21%. If you have the executive team and the board, and not just gender, but diverse overall, it's going to be upwards of 40-something%. So there's real business results to do this. And so it's just putting the effort in to get it done.
Well, you are putting the effort in. I would love for you to be specific, if you can, about what you are doing at work, because it's powerful. I mean, it's really impressive when you shared some of the programs. Could you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's no secret private equity it's probably lowest rung of gender equality or other underrepresented groups. And so really working with the team the last year to help improve that at all levels. So some of that is opportunistic hiring. How are we going to hire at the higher levels and make sure that because one of the real problems of DEI when it comes to hiring, I think, is when people are rushing. It's like, I gotta fill this thing, and like everyone's in panic at the disco. But if you can take the time and push back on your search firms or whomever you're using for your recruiting to say, like, that doesn't work for me. Like, I need a diverse slate of people. I know they're out there, and pushing them. But a couple of the programs that I'm really proud of that Roark is doing in terms of this. So we do different sponsorship things with organizations like VLK Capital, which is an undergrad organization specific to Black students. We do Girls Who Invest, another one. And this is really based on the insight of the people that are rising up in private equity it's like that secret society, you know, like your parents or somebody's family friend, and it's kind of like you get pulled up that way, you know, what school to go to, what class to go to, all of that. And so the insights were, gosh, like people are falling down in the interview process because they're just not as prepped and ready. And so we're putting the talent and the treasurer behind developing 2 different programs. One is an externship only for BPOC and women. And we're bringing in 9 rising juniors, and we're going to pay for their housing. We give them a very nice stipend. But the best part is that they get access to the opportunity. So they'll have a 2-week class where we put them through Wall Street prep, which is thousands of dollars of, you know, real modeling analytical experience, get exposure to our senior people, you know, be in the building, be in the conversations, go in the boardroom and all of that. And then whether they work for Roark or they end up going into the finance industry overall, the KPI is not a recruiting tool. It's, you know, how are we helping people improve their lives? And going back to what I said about my vulnerability thing, like how are we unlocking potential for others in only the way that we know how, right? To pass that knowledge on to others. So I'm really proud of that program. And I could go on and on and on about things that we're doing, but I don't want to hog the airtime.
It's great.
That's really wonderful. I think that's something that's really needed for different communities to have that area, to get that access to it. So I'm all for it. So I know we're really close on time, so I'll jump into one more question that ties into the vulnerability you just mentioned, Allison. Is there a way to communicate or share the importance of vulnerability as a strength, particularly in a situation where it's met with some resistance?
That's a good one.
And that was from Lynn. Thanks, Lynn.
I think I'll just have a quick statement and then maybe Kim has a better answer than me. But I think vulnerability isn't like bringing all your problems to work, right? Like when we talk about vulnerability, it's being willing to take a step back and have others give input, and to take a risk, to speak up, to just not have yourself tied up with a perfect little bow. And I think that's the vulnerability that we're talking about. More so. And if you're in an environment that isn't allowing you to do that, I mean, I've switched roles before because my values didn't correlate with the values of the others leaders in the organization. And, you know, maybe it's time to look where you can go to your next stop and use your curiosity to keep going and achieving and being ambitious. But Kim, you probably will be much more eloquent than me.
No, it's so similar to what I was going to say. We don't always have to have the answers. I think Allison was saying that. Don't feel like if you don't have an answer, then maybe that's okay. My counterpoint to that, though, is we typically have a point of view. And so vulnerability to me is being able to say, I don't have the right or exact answer. Let me go do some research to find that, but I will give you my point of view. And maybe that can get us half of the way there, because you're starting to then kind of you're exposing your vulnerability, which is I don't know everything, but I certainly am confident in the way that I think. And if you believe in my expertise, then we can do this together. And so don't be afraid to kind of go 50% of the way. You don't have to go all the way every time. And so having confidence in yourself that you can be vulnerable in exposing that you're not 100%, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I'll jump in real fast on that if it's okay too, because I just had something happen last week that I thought was really cool. You know, I lead a small team, and one of the people that I lead sent me a message that said, I just want to really tell you, thank you for creating such a safe space for me to work because I feel like I'm really growing. And I was like, like, and then I went and told my husband, like, this really cool thing happened today. This made me feel really good. But I realized that what I was doing with that person is just being open and being like, look, I don't expect you to be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. My job is to create a safe space around you where you can make those mistakes and fail, and it doesn't have a, catastrophic implication. And also, by the way, we're not curing cancer here, so it's okay. It's like, calm down a little bit. We're going to be all right. But I do think it's, as a leader, some of it's just like being open and having a conversation like that. And I think a lot of people don't expect their bosses to kind of come at it that way and be like, look, it's okay. Be yourself. I'm going to be honest with you. I'll be straight with you when I don't have the answers too. But I also don't expect you to be perfect, but let's, build safety around you so that you can do your thing. So that would be my take on that.
If I may jump in real quick, and I'm so glad we're talking about vulnerability. The reason why I wanted to talk about curiosity and saying no earlier, Kim, was, to me, curiosity and vulnerability are step siblings in many ways. They sound like they're in total opposite ends, but they actually back up to one another, because if you are being vulnerable, to Allison's description, you're actually asking questions that it's okay, I don't know the answer, but that actually makes you curious. And curiosity is one of the strongest characteristics of any great marketer. So
I think you just wrote your next book.
He's like,
can you all help me with that?
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
I'm being vulnerable. I am a horrible writer. So
oh, you're being
good. So anyway, thank you for sharing all that. I know we are running right up against it. Kayona, is there any other really important question that came? I know they're all important, but
I know they're all so good. It's hard to pick.
Well, I was thinking maybe like a follow-up blog or something where we kind of maybe come back and get you guys' take on a couple of these questions we didn't get to. I think that could be fun.
Yeah.
So.
Anything there, Kayona?
Yeah, I'll ask one more. I think this will be really powerful to kind of end on. So for women just starting out in their careers, what advice can you have for them gaining the confidence to use their voice and overcome the fear of feeling like they don't have the authority to speak on certain things?
Just do it.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Just go for it. There will be no wrong way. You will find your way. And couple that with preparation. Be prepared. Like, do some reading, know who you're going into a meeting with, prepare some like really poignant thoughts that you may never end up sharing, but in your mind, if somebody turns to you across the table and says, hey, Jenny, what do you think about that? You have something that you've prepared. So I think go for it in preparation.
Perfect. Do it. We got it.
Love it. Absolutely. I think that's a perfect mic drop moment. And we are running 4 minutes over. So first off, Allison, Kim, thank you so much. Two of our favorite people. This is absolutely incredible. I have goosebumps. So I'm going to thank you there. You're welcome to kind of sit. We're going to finish this up here with a little description of what we've got going on in 2 weeks. But thank you for everybody who joined. We are going to put this episode up on YouTube next week. So please share this. This is an extremely important conversation, and it has to keep going. That's the only way we're going to be able to make change. Also, take a moment to fill out the quick survey. I know in 2 weeks, Shannon, I'm just going to go ahead and take this over. I know we're running up. Join us on Friday, April 9th. We'll be chatting with Steve Dinker. He's a staple and veteran in the Atlanta marketing community. He was also at Coca-Cola, probably a little bit prior to you all, but and he's also probably the only SpeedBumps guest who have interviewed Mel Brooks on the red carpet. That's a little tidbit we'll dive into. But Steve's going to come on board. He's going to talk about his vast experience working in the world of marketing, entertainment, media, and digital. So we're really, really excited to have him join. He's most recently been SVP of marketing at Warner Media, where he led Turner Classic Movies for several years. It's going to be incredible. So please, please, please join us for that. And also make sure you check out SpeedBumps Live on social, LinkedIn and Instagram. Anything else, Shannon, before we wrap up?
I can't follow these ladies or that wrap up. So thank you so much,
No.
both of you. I think you gave lots of great advice to a lot of people today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
both.
Yay.
Hey,
Have a
Kim,
great
can't wait
weekend.
for
Bye, everybody.
cocktails.
I know, Allison, let's go have cocktails.
Do it.
And all of you guys. Bye.
Yeah.
Have a good
Just
weekend.
do it.
Bye.
Bye. Take
Just
care,
do it.
everybody.
Thank you.